I would like to thank you, all of you, for coming to our program today. We have, I am Raul Moarquech Ferrera-Balanquet. I'm the curator and one of the artists at the exhibition Africana, Super Realities. Next to me, there is Akili Ron Anderson, a well-known African-American artist. And to his left, there is Raimi Gbadamosi, who is a well-known England and Nigerian artist, transnational artist, who are, both of them are part of this exhibit. And so I have a few for our conversation, a few questions. And I want to start asking Akili, because I want to really, the undercurrent of this exhibit is that all the artists that participate at the show, we all work, teach, curate, direct at Howard University. And Howard University is an iconic center of Black culture from the 1800s to the present. And within my curatorial approach, I try to highlight the importance, the historical importance of this present moment with these artists who are now at Howard University, and the kind of discourse in artistic practices that they're bringing not only to their work, but also to the student generations at Howard University. So I want to start with Akili. In many ways, because I had the opportunity, since I arrived to Howard, that we became friends. Akili have a sense of community that is very engaging. And the other day we were talking, and I learned that Akili have studied with Jane Wells, who is an artist, an African-American artist that I am in love with it, because he's a great printmaker, a great painter also, although I like his printmaking more than his painting. It's my nature, I don't know, it's my attraction. So when Akili told me that he studied with him, I somehow it echoes of how the importance of having Akili teaching to the present generation at Howard University, and what is going to happen with those students in the future, recognizing that they have studied with an African-American artist that is an artist, is an activist. Akili was very fundamental in changing the way that art was being taught at Howard University, because in the 60s he had a Western European kind of curriculum, and he fought for changing that curriculum. So I want, somehow to not only to speak about Wells, but about how you became trained and how that reflects in your present artwork.
Well, thank you. And you bring up memories and topics that will be in my next book when I start writing. But it's in my memory and in my heart. You call the name of James Wells, there's Lois Mailou Jones, there's Jeff Donaldson, whose name is associated with this exhibit. And these are people who made me a man. They made me an artist. They made me a whole person. And that was the nature of Howard in its entire history. And it has gone on to improve itself with our new leadership. Gbadamosi, who I met in 1977 in Lagos, Nigeria, when he was about 5 years old, I think. We were in the same concert, seeing Mary McCabe, and I was there, and he told me he was there. I said, oh, too bad we didn't meet, but he was a youngster, and I'm an oldster. So history and circumstance are quite interesting to me in terms of and when I say interesting, all my class knows to repeat, worthy of further investigation. That's one of my lessons. And so I'm so happy to have Raul, to have, almost call him, I want to call him Raimi, but then because he's my boss, I deserve a raise. So every opportunity I get, I try to sort of get into that. No, I love being Howard. I love meeting new people and wondering will we be friends or not, because I don't have enemies, okay? Because I don't like stress and strain. Now, in my life, I've had a rest from the activism of my youth. I value it, but I have to stay alive, and so therefore I have to watch my heartbeat and that it beats correctly along with the rest of my body. So James Wells, he was a father figure, and the whole faculty actually. And it was amazing for me because I had difficulty graduating because I wanted to take every class that was being offered. And sometimes, as a matter of fact, from Wells, I took his class twice, in secret. Nobody, I got somebody to sign my card. Don't tell anybody at the school. Okay. But I just wanted to study with him officially. He was an official person. He did mentor me after he retired. I was at his house with his operation and so forth. So it was that kind of environment that nurtured all of us, but in particular, if you knew not just history, but if you had a feeling for the future, you said, I got to study with this person. And that's what really the college level is about, is finding your mentor / teacher to really get the essence of what they have to offer. Not just the syllabus and the curriculum. It's a matter of just knowing that person and their history. And boy, I got some secrets I'm gonna tell you from there. It was amazing. Just such a loving. So I can go on and on. I want you to edit my statements here so that I can, respect everybody's time and your time to speak as well. So I can edit myself right now, and you can move on how you want to manage the talk.
But thank you so much for, bringing the word back to me. And I really wanted, but I want to go and talk about Gbadamosi, who, literally, we just met when I arrived to Howard University. And I have found out that it is a very interesting way we have lived in like certain parallel ways, because I have friends who are from my generation, who are his friends, and Raimi, it was a work on one of the most important cultural magazines that came out in the 90s called Third Text. I recommend to look into it because all our generation was just waiting for the third text to come out to read it, because that was the cutting edge theory that was coming at that moment. And Raimi was part of it. And although I wanted him to talk about that, I also want Raimi you to talk about the kind of how, because Raimi is a conceptual artist who develops concepts and develops works, and so and this is my speculation, because coming from the generation that we come, it was important to be involved into theory and criticism to be an artist, And I want to ask you if how that environment influenced the kind of work that you have been doing and still doing with your conceptual work.
So I think I'd start by acknowledging the impact of Marcel Duchamp on kind of the argument that the artist has the ability to define what an artwork is. And I guess I'm starting with him quite deliberately because the ability to speak by the artist had, up to that point, been somewhat controlled by those outside of what the artist did, who then defined whether something was significant or not. Of course, you know, kind of the long-term impact of this for cultural production was that those who traditionally and previously did not have a voice for political or racial or sexual or gendered reasons could use that as the basis to then move out into the world and say, I too exist culturally, and what I do culturally is of significance. You know, as the world both expanded and shrank simultaneously, and the expansion was suddenly, there were more voices that were being listened to, and it shrank because people could leave one part of the world and arrive at the other. The phrase airport lounge curating, for instance, emerged because a lot of curators literally spent their lives in airport lounges. They're going from place to place to place to place. And so there was this kind of expanding and shrinking that happened. And it became important, at least to me and to a host of others, that the very nature of the material that used to make art also had to be questioned. I mean, galleries still, to this day, are still dominated by oil on canvas. I mean, it's simply amazing about how dominant those two things are when it comes to cultural production. And I love painting. I mean, great painting is great. But for a lot of people, their ability to speak is both redefined and curtailed by the very nature of material. So if someone, let's say from the Democratic Republic of Congo, emerges tomorrow and starts painting using oil and canvas, even if they hadn't seen a painting from the West in their whole life, people are going to try to find ways of defining and conceptualizing what they do through the language of painting that already exists. So they're trapped, whether they like it or not. So for me, the ability to speak as a practitioner is very important. And as artists in Britain, in particular, started to emerge and the Black Arts movement opened up, and discussions about who owned space, both physically and conceptually, started emerging, the nature of material and what we do with it also became terribly important.
Thank you. Thank you. Ooh. The other half of this conversation, I want to focus on the work that we have at the exhibit, and why I wanted to talk about that, and I'm going to somehow use my subjective ethnography. I was explaining one of the visitors here that I was in London in 2009 at the Tate Gallery as a curator in a panel, and there was this whole discussion about scaled, you know, and so, and I had to recognize that up to that moment, I was suffering because I was traveling too much. The airport, you know, curatorial, you know, as you were mentioning, that also happened to artists of my generation moving, you know, so I didn't have a studio and I didn't have a place to work. So, and this curator was talking about how in Western art history, the idea of the big painting, going back, is what dominates, and you think that you are a big artist because you do big paintings and big artwork. And so I just tackle into him and say, look, you know, that's my biggest problem. I cannot really paint big because I'm traveling, I don't have the studio, this nomadic life that I have right now. And in front of everybody, he say, okay, Raul, how big is the Mona Lisa? And everybody went like, oh, you know. And really, it broke down completely that fallacy of having that you have to do big painting in order to be an artist of certain dimensions and certain, and understand that scale, you know, that is something that you can, like, you know, as an artist, you produce and you decide what it works for you at a given moment and a given space. So I freed myself from the constraints of not having the studio and start producing the works in many ways, although I still producing big works. You know, when I go back to my house in Mexico and have my studio, I use my time to do that. But when I'm traveling or coming, you know, or I'm here in DC, you know, I go back to the small scales. So in that sense, I don't necessarily want you two to talk about the scale, but the nature of the work that you have here at the exhibition, and how do you articulate your creative process in relation to the way that it has been expressed in the artwork that is here?
Well, you have excited my interest, and I had to clean out my garage today and take all of this stuff, was jam-packed, and put it in a 1982 Camaro because the city was getting ready to tow it out of my yard. So I was exhausted, and I'm so thankful, if I said it before, that Raul called me. Some people don't call you. They say, oh, you didn't show up. You know, he said, hey, man, you forget what else was? I said, no, because after all this work that Tim and his staff and Raul has done. And so anyway, scale became, I got to deal for a little bit, an issue with me when I got into performance art. And to some people, that term means artists who control a live performance, visual artists. That's the one. But I organized with a group of artists that were there at Howard, students, one person in theater, one person in music, and one person in visual art, which was me. And so we organized conceptually. I put paintings on stage, and you know, they were big and heavy and cumbersome. And so I got into photography and filmmaking, and projected the film through a rear projection screen, which is, you know, you put the projectors behind the screen, not in front of it. And because you're looking at an audience, and they were like 9 by 12 feet, and we used 2 of them. And then we used a dancer that danced in between the two apparatus, and the shadow jumped up. And so we eventually got to a point where it was about 10 different projectors, slide projectors, film projectors. But then the point I wanted to make, really, with all of that background, is that it was expensive, okay? And we made some money, and we had a record, which one was actually almost a hit record. And we had a little money, and we decided to buy more equipment and get fancy and everything. But, you know, it came to a point where I tried to get some film developed, and it turned out black, not culturally, but I'm saying black. You couldn't project it. And so either I forgot a process or whatever, but then it was expensive, and I started scratching in the film and drawing on the film and putting chemicals on the film and then projecting those and then getting that copied so that it was on a stable piece of film. Because the film would break in the projector because of all the scratching and the chemicals on top of it. Now, is this going in the direction that you wanted us to?
It's the direction you are taking, and some, you know, we are African diaspora artists. We are not chronological, and so we don't have to follow, you know.
You're so radical, my brother, you know. But good thing, that's a good thing, okay. But I'm saying that's my experience. I paint, these are my paintings over here, but primarily the art form that's kept me financially secure has been stained glass. So I've done churches, and I've done one metro site, Columbia Heights Metro. They actually put a plaque up there that has my name, because a lot of people don't believe that a black guy does stained glass, you know. So I went to the churches, and I said, well, yeah, but they would say, well, who did you get to actually do it for you? That's a nice design. We like your ideas, but who actually did it? I said, well, we, meaning I would say we because we are we. We are more important than I. That's a whole discussion, okay? And so my children work with me. My son organizes the installation, so I said to the client, we install it, we design it, and we build it. Okay, we don't make the glass. I said, that's what we don't do. We go up to the place and get all these thousands of different. In fact, the first time I had that experience, I went to the, what's it, S.A. Benheim, there in New York, major glass importer and so forth. And I said, I want some red. And he took me to a road that's as long as two of these buildings. And all down that road was red glass. And so I almost cried. But I did leave. I left, and I was in New York, and I went home to D.C. I couldn't take it. It was so, all these are red. I had to walk down that aisle. You had to pull out the glass and look at it through the light and so forth. And I said, I can't take this right now. I have to go back home and then leave home organized to understand that I had to go through rows of red, of blue, of green, and so forth, and different textures. And, it gives you a headache. Well, it gave me a headache, given that challenge. So I was challenged in a sense of, well, you're black, you can't really do stained glass. It must be some Italian guy or something you import or whatever it is. That's what I got. And I was dealing with black churches, but they couldn't get it until I demonstrated. Once I demonstrated it, then, yeah, we want you, because you're from the neighborhood. By the way, I'm from Cardozo. Anybody? Cardozo? Yeah, Cardozo High School. That's me, 1964. I am 77. I'm happy about that. I'm happy about it because the history that I've gone through at Howard during the 60s, the Black Arts Movement was referred to and so forth. And where we met, I was saying, well, we didn't actually meet. Where we were at the same time in Nigeria was doing the FESTEC, which is, I can't remember all the words of the acronym, so we didn't try. But right now for my students, I've been asked to teach painting and drawing. So I do that. I do it well. I'm very satisfied with my progress. And so I'm happy to teach that, to be the person they choose to study with. That is what I mentioned earlier. They said, oh, we want to take your class because we heard about you. We understand that you're a loving person, which I am. I work on that because sometimes I don't like people, and so I have to work on being a lover of people. Everybody smiled. You should see yourself. You should really see, because everybody smiled when I said that. Yeah, damn, I know what you mean. Oh my, tell it, brother. Okay, so Brother Raimi is going to say something now, I think, because I feel his energy coming. So he has a way of doing that.
Okay.
I am interested in you brought up scale, and I know we don't have to necessarily speak about it, but I am interested in what scale represents. There used to be jokes and essays written about scale, in particular with American painting. Because American painting radically altered the way that scale functioned. Mm-hmm. Galleries were bigger, people were bigger, everything was just big. And so the value of some paintings was literally attached to the size of it. And it also represented a form of cultural power, because it is often forgotten when people go to galleries and see large paintings that those things won't fit into the average domestic house. Mm-hmm. Most walls in a lot of people's homes aren't as big as those paintings. Mm-hmm. They diminish in galleries because of the size of the gallery. But when you measure those things, okay, you can take them off the frame and get them through the door that way and then reframe them. But now you're stuck with the thing. And so, yeah, it's the artist, whether by design or, well, there's design to it because they made the things, were making statements about who they wanted to engage with their works. Either you were wealthy enough to have the kind of house that could accommodate those works, or they would go into sites of culture, into museums, into galleries, which meant that they were already part of the larger discourse of culture. For those who sat outside of that, to make those objects were somewhat aspirational, because no one was going to buy them. And so, if I was making large paintings, well, that's the zeitgeist, and then you dare do the thing, now you're stuck. And so it affected the way that that culture mediated within society, because if those were the objects that were being written about and being taken seriously, and what you did wasn't, then you were simply out of the game. You could read about it, you could see it, and you could suffer, but you couldn't get involved. And so, for a lot of artists, again, who felt they're outside of this, they looked in, and it was, there were arguments being made that, well, it's not that we're not interested in your work, you're just not making the right kind of work. And so, and this relates to sculpture too. And even kind of the massive installations that people now have, multi-screen, massive things when it comes to video. And the quality. I remember when large photographs were in and Cibachrome. Yeah. I mean, Cibakhromes were beautiful, but I don't know, no one makes them anymore now. I'm sure you can still make them, but for a while, they were the thing. Those things were ridiculously expensive, but they're incredible to look at. Again, needed big walls. And so scale functions. It does something. It says to the people, we're interested in big ideas. And, as I sit here, I'm trying to remember the name of a Canadian philosopher who's written a really good book about minor gestures and how, that people always remember the larger gestures. But in fact, most people's lives and what they do are minor. And not minor in the sense of insignificant, but actually, it's waking up in the morning, it's brushing teeth, it's going into the kitchen, making breakfast, and these series of minor gestures that eventually become the thing that holds people together. It's amazing going to a rally, to a demonstration, and to see the impact of all these minor gestures and how it affects the way that we appreciate what society is. And so for me, those ideas of scale become really important to me as a practitioner. And so if I want to make something that's really big, I have to make it up out of small components. I don't have the space to make things, to make one large thing for a museum. So when I have museum shows, it has to be components. And I think of that politically, how again, when those who don't have much power need to engage with society, they have to gather people around them. But when you're the empowered, one person can go forth and say, I want this. And they come with cultural and political and economic power that allows them to do this. But when you're not one of the empowered, and back to the large painting, the large installation, all the rest of it, most of those individuals came from the empowered body. And of course they would like to deny that allows them to make those kind of work. That no, it's just my simple genius that allowed this. Yeah. But it isn't. It's wrapped up in birth and place and politics. And so for me, scale is significant because of what it immediately says. So you mentioned the Mona Lisa. Back then everything was expensive, so people weren't making large paintings. But it's still expensive. And so whenever I see those large paintings and people want to talk about, oh God, it was tough and suffering, and to look at the size of the painting. To commit to this already tells me where you are and what you represent. And I have nothing against big paintings. I think I've seen some really good, great paintings. But there is something in that statement that is crucial for me.
Well, thank you very much.
See what you started?
Yes, no, and it's really interesting. I want to bring the conversation to the public to see if there is questions, and so we can, somehow continue the thread. Because yes, I'm glad that these issues are being spoken, and because most of the time there is the interpretation of works that done by African diaspora artists, always stay in the representation of, there is a black person, it's no black person. And there, many people, many art historians don't understand that the work that we produce are very deep and have all these contextual, historical, and critical, and theoretical elements. Like when you were talking about the small things, and I was thinking about, that I have been in the process of curating this piece and realizing, it clicked to me, and I said, oh yeah, that's how he put it together. It was a small thing, and look how big it looks, And so I really, if there is any questions.
Well, yes, because flags are deeply emblematic, and their reproductions, kind of the multiplication of that, of the emblem, forces a return to the original. So, one can start thinking of Benjamin and all the rest of it, the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction, which lingers because actually he makes a very important case about what reproduction does to an object. And then this desire to return to the original. But in fact, the more it is reproduced, the more significant the original becomes because of its reproductions. And so, for me, the emblem is significant, but it is also important, at least in this piece in particular, that people bear a relationship between what the flag represents as a symbol and the text beneath it, in this case. They're non-identical flags, and this is important. You're not looking at the same flag. And so as time changes, the emblems that we use also change. There's that phrase, that if you live within a monarchy, and actually, even if you live within a presidency, the president is dead, long live the president. It's always often the king is dead, long live the king, or the queen is dead. But actually the same thing, in that there's the desire for continuity forces the reproduction of the same. Galbraith, who's one of my favorite American economists, let's see, he rivals Chomsky, but anyway, we'll skip that for a moment. Galbraith wrote extensively about power and how power affects people when they come into possession of power. And emblems do the same. All emblems started out somewhere. A good idea. Then it becomes an emblem. Then it is absorbed, and it becomes a thing that becomes representative of the thing that it is. So after a while, people can no longer separate the emblem from what it represents. And at that point, the emblem becomes really powerful. And you can make that emblem do almost anything you want. And so, when flags, in this case, flags are made, as they do their work, they suddenly become more and more significant. So even at this point, the fact that you recognize that the flag is on aluminium and it is an object in itself means that it's already started doing its work. In that now you can't separate what is on the aluminium from what is in front of you. And I am interested in how power works. In that, power just sort of sits notionally somewhere, and then it is put into operation. So, and I'll end with this, a classic case in point. There's a new speaker in Congress, and it was amusing to me listening to the press talk about how this person went from relative obscurity to becoming the third in line to be the president. Like, who is this guy? This is this constant question. I can assure you, if you wander up to this guy who nobody knew yesterday, all the accoutrement of power is around him. Now, I know for certain his salary doubled. That happened. The Secret Service are probably all around him now. And I can assure you within a couple of weeks, people forget that he wasn't this man they were talking about, that who is this guy? Power kicks in. And as it is manipulated and used, it becomes invisible from the person who wields it. He simply becomes the Speaker of the House.
So every time I'm around or I speak with my colleagues, I say, damn, I gotta read 10 more books tonight. And I mean, why y'all doing this to me? I say that to myself. I'm not saying it right now. But I marvel at your elegant radicalness, okay? And I feel like I'm in good company because I'm trying to be a radical, given this society, because you refer to the speaker. It's almost kind of funny, the speaker. Can he actually speak? I mean, well, or what is he speaking about, and so forth. And that's something that people of African descent have to, and we are burdened by it. Why can't we live a life that is not as burdensome? But then there's victory, and victory gives you a high. And when you have people that look at your work and you say, oh, I'm seeing something that I never considered, or this is new to me, and it's exhilarating, or information. Information is, because what my friend Raimi does in most of our critiques is with students, he says, what are you reading now? What have you read lately? And I look at myself, I don't say anything. I say, what have I read lately? And so forth. And so I challenge myself because I have a lot of books that I'm trying to get to, I mean, I've gone through them, but to go from, and now what I'm doing is reading it from cover to cover as a discipline, even when it was published. Well, of course when it was published, but I'm just saying it's the kind of intellectual energy that I'm actually bragging about at my university. And that's why I'm appreciating this so much. I've actually gotten energy from my very laborsome day.
You did, but I want to reaffirm something, two things. One is that in Western thought and philosophy, they don't consider that what we produce as an artist is theory. In our generation, we began to understand that because the books, that is the whole thing about the book as being, or the writers of books as being, the most important type of way of discourse in that, but we actually, and at least in my generation, and I hope in the future, we understand that all the works that not only Afro diaspora, but indigenous women's art, who have been produced, Latinx, from the 70s to the present, are historical and theoretical documents that may people, and the art historians may not be trained. It may take a few years for them to understand that what women have produced in their work have been big theoretical statements about their conditions, their historical conditions, the oppressions that they have felt, the oppression of their genders and their politics that have been impregnated within those artworks. And when you say about, I have to read the book and I have to read the books, and I say, I hope that one day, people will understand that the works produced by our generations are books also, in a visual, maybe in a visual language, but you will realize how many, not only graphic signs, who are Afro diaspora graphic writings have been incorporated in Afro diaspora work. Letters itself, you look into it, and the statements are there, And I think, what I want to point out is that we have read to the point that we have been able to express.
Oh, yeah.
I do want to, so I have some feelings. Okay, I'll start with this.
Okay.
So many years ago, some archaeologist was, as they often do, wandering around.
Who?
Archaeologists.
Oh, I
wandering
just said R. Kelly. I was trying to.
Yeah, him too.
I was trying to put that together. Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And in Mali, in somewhere in Mali, I can't tell you exactly where it is, but the records exist. Land which has now become desert. A massive library was found. This huge library, and it had been, sand had slowly over the years covered the library, this massive structure. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I remember that occurred to me at the time wasn't necessarily the loss of the library. What I found most exciting was that this massive library had existed. And it was clearly not that much of a big deal at the time for it to slowly disappear. It, for me, it indicated a type of cultural wealth that only happens when people have quite a lot. And then you allow a particular type of decay to occur. I mean, the book for me, the idea of the book, I mean, when we look at it and think about it, paper, where it emerged from, writing, where it emerged from. If it hadn't been for, Arabs and North Africans.
And Chinese.
Yes, and a host of others.
And Egyptians.
The Dark Ages would have simply remained the Dark Ages. So when Europe decided to emerge again, it had to send people out to get those writings, which had now been written in Arabic, which is then translated and all the rest of it. And these things are significant because sometimes it is easy to see the book as a Western idea. Mm-hmm. For me, the book is not a Western idea. The book is a store of knowledge. And it is important that people really read, because there's nothing as desperate as the idiot savant. Yeah. There are so many ideas, and the more ideas we have access to, the more we can do.
Yes.
So for me, reading is crucial, and there's this politics of disavowal that emerges, where people say, I am not going to do that because it is part of something over there. What's her name? God, this is a moment where because her name is very important. But she said that you can't destroy the master's house with the master's tools. And I'm willing to come back and...
Other Lord.
Yes, Audre Lorde. And she is right. But we need to know what the master's tools are. The fact that the master has claimed the tool doesn't make it the master's tool. And this is really important, because back to power, the powerful will say, you have to read what I say, and what you say is insignificant. And back to the politics of disavowal. For me, I think it is crucial, deeply, deeply crucial, to not think that ideas only come from one direction, and that the book is the possession of one section of society. Because if that is allowed to happen, then the powerful have won.
Well, I thank you so much for being part of this program and this exhibition, and I want to thank the Hillyers and all the staff of the Hillyers for organizing the event. We are very honored to be part in this space. We have such an important history in Washington, D.C., and that we have become part of that history. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.